Just one quick note before we get started. 2 swear words come out of Tymon's mouth about the 15-minute mark. If you have kids around, make sure to cover their ears. Otherwise, it's pretty safe.
Hi, I'm Adam.
And I'm Nitsan, and this is The Final Curtain, a special series brought to you by Stories from the Eastern West, bringing you personal accounts from people who experienced the collapse of the Eastern Bloc.
Today, we're meeting an artist who happened to have a few occupations.
My name is Tymon Tymanski. Actually, I'm Richard Tymon Tymanski. I am a songwriter. I happen to write plays. I used to be a columnist as well. I used to work in the radio. I used to work in TV programs.
Alongside the many jobs he's had, Tymanski established himself as a notorious rebel, always opposed to something, always striving for change, always using very strong, uncompromising language to criticize things he didn't like.
And he started his career as a relentless revolutionist in the late 1980s, doing everything he could to oppose the bleak communist reality.
Coming right up on The Final Curtain.
Dramatic eyewitness accounts of fighting in Bucharest.
Police had forcefully beaten demonstrators in East Berlin.
Thousands of Czechoslovaks shaking their house keys.
The protest movement is now too big to be controlled.
Good evening. It is over in Poland.
Iron Curtain across Europe, torn down.
Perhaps it's a funny coincidence, but Tymon Tymanski was born in a year synonymous with rebellion, 1968. That also means he came of age in the 1980s, which are commonly remembered as the saddest, most hopeless times of the communist reign in Poland. That's where his story begins.
Two channels on TV, terrible teachers, who were totally brainwashed. My peers were brainwashed too. My parents were brainwashed too. They were sort of intelligentsia, but they didn't read books. They were cooking cabbage on Sundays, just smelling with cabbage, and we were watching some first channel with some stupid, propaganda programs. So all you felt was like, I want to break through. I want to get out of here, and you began some kind of internal emigration by reading, by writing, by becoming somebody. So the first thing, in this big depression was like looking around and seeing whether there's any people who look like me, who are punk musicians, whose dress code is so similar, who look like either new wave or punk rock fans of musicians. So that was like a sign of belonging to a scene. That's like I'm like somewhere in a forgotten country with fences, like totally gray, darkish, where no light actually transpires through the windows. So like sort of prison, yeah. And for a moment, something opened up, like around 1980, where we had a solidarity movement, and so out of a sudden something began to get through.
Tymanski is referring to the so-called Freedom Festival, a 10-month-long period after the legalization of the Solidarity movement. For almost a year, censorship was looser, and people were allowed to speak their minds to an extent unseen before. However, this period was abruptly ended by the introduction of martial law in December 1981.
Like a gasp of fresh air, which then was stolen from us. Yes, we were left with nothing, and the door sort of was slammed closed, and we had like 7 depressive or 8 depressive years of nothing, going on. And when I entered the University of Gdańsk in 1986, there were like more madmen, more scruples of this type who were my friends, who would become my friends, and we formed Totart. Totart was sort of a conscious movement of people having an artistic commune and being, I would say, it was the last Polish avant-garde of the 20th century, with poets, with musicians, trying to make it together, trying to formulate some ideas. So it was to me, it was very essential, moment of life, because I realized that I'm not alone. There are some other crazy guys with some crazy energy, and then some avalanche happened. We began kind of rolling down.
Weź minąłem, wylej ze dwora, spójrz mi na mnie, spójrz na oczy. Jestem korkiem, jestem dorszy za to wtedy moje nadzieja.
But at the time it was like a happening of us coming together and improvise on the stage. We would recite poetry, throw meat, raw meat, at the participants of our happenings. Well, it was just doing a happening together and seeing what happens. Obviously it was very iconoclastic, very sometimes brutal. But I mean, we didn't fight. We didn't like cut ourselves like hip hop. We were like more, let's say, intellectual. But I would say, it was a brainstorm for people who were students and who would come to see us, and they very often were like totally shocked.
The members of Totart did everything they could think of to break the boundaries of the grey reality around them. Throwing raw meat at the audience wasn't the most shocking thing they'd done.
There are accounts of them mimicking sexual intercourse and even performing bodily functions on stage.
This was all part of a very specific goal they strived for. They called it transgression.
To me, transgression was very spiritual. It was like slapping somebody on the face and saying, "Hey, wakey, wake up." At the time, it was like, wake up, see the world outside. You are in the world of communism. You have to do something about it. Either write a punk song or a protest song, or begin writing a book, or making a documentary on what you are witnessing. Yeah. But it also, to me, has some deeper connotation of like bearing testimony to the life in itself. So to me, it was like I tried to become an artist in my own terms. In a very difficult situation.
Apart from being outrageously provocative, Totart would dazzle the audience with the improvised absurdist speeches and poems, all stuffed with neologisms and streams of consciousness.
Absurdity is a very serious tool. I have my own saying, there's no intellect without humor. I mean, humor and absurdity is a bright part of intellect. If you are not, humorous, if you're not funny, if you cannot laugh at yourself, you are not clever. I would say that absurdity in the Tri-Cities music scene was also concealing our protest, against communism. But it's sort of shallow to put it this way, because whenever I read some political literature like Solzhenitsyn, I would become totally like angry, like for 2 weeks. But then I realized, like, hey, come on, it's gonna end soon, or not soon. But I don't want to become a political writer or musician. I want to kind of see it. I want to sort of testify to it, be a witness of it, of this thing. But I don't want to be immersed in anger and hate. So that's like, okay, I know where I am, but I want to be above that. That's why I was searching for some deeper experience. So on one hand, we are fighting the situation with the absurd, but then we kind of had some, let's say, deeper and further goals to reach. I mean, we use absurd just to kind of, to flip out. Yeah, to flip out.
And then there came the year 1989, and in Poland, communism was officially gone. No more brainwashing, no more propaganda, no more censorship.
All of a sudden, we were 21, and we were free and playing music on the streets at the time, because the clubs wouldn't have us, wouldn't invite us yet. But playing, on the streets for, like a meal or chips, whatever, yeah, was like great fun. It was like a very happy times, as Barat says it, It was like we are totally happy over the fact that we are free. We can do anything we want.
A few years before the fall of communism, Tymanski had really gotten into jazz music. So now, in the new free world, he decided that was what he was going to do.
I don't exactly remember why I began playing jazz at the moment, but I thought it's got very cool. I thought that it's very cool and sort of hipster-like. Why not play jazz? Jazz is such a cool, language to operate. Plus, 90s resemble 60s in a way. Free everything. Free sex, beers, just pouring.
Almost immediately, though, he rebelled against everybody who'd been playing jazz in Poland before him.
Then I met those professors, Polish jazz musicians, who were totally sour, totally stupid. They didn't read books, they didn't read, they didn't watch movies. They couldn't really elaborate or express themselves in a sophisticated way. They were good technically, but actually they were simpletons. Very often, what they did had nothing to do with art and nothing to do with risk, taking a risk, like going over the border. Transgression, as we said before. Out of 10 jazz musicians who played in Tri-City at the time, I took 4 and we formed a band. A strange liaison band. It was like some kind of ill marriage, yeah? Like 2 guys who are totally classically trained, 2 guys who are from punk scene, and jazz drummer who doesn't care. And somehow we kind of happened to find a language. We happened to, for 7 years, like the Beatles, we found a language, we found some kind of compromise, some kind of love, until it kind of, fell apart.
The band was called Miłość, the Polish word for love, and it quickly became famous for being the most interesting new jazz group in the country. They reached the heights of popularity and strongly inspired the next generation of improvising musicians. But that didn't mean they became rich. In early 1990s Poland, jazz was still a niche genre, and their efforts didn't make them much money in return.
Meanwhile, some of Tymanski's friends went another way.
Some of my friends, like there's a poet, Konyo Konnak, our guru, let's say, he quickly had found his way to the cream of the cream, let's say, of the showbiz. And at the time we were a little bit jealous, about, envious about the fact that he was earning better money and he kind of sold himself, yeah?
It was a very common problem among musicians during this period. They suddenly had to think about how to earn a living in a much more entrepreneurial way than back in the communist era, where concerts were often organised by the authorities. And so began their search for that elusive compromise between staying true to yourself and being able to pay the rent.
Imagine that there's a 17-year-old guy who is sponsored by his mother, and he writes a fanzine. And imagine Konyo, who's a poet, a Totart participant, who now, let's say, gives head and sells his ass, let's say, whatever. But at the same time, he's doing the right alternative thing. But he also earns money because he's a great, talker. He's a great announcer, MC, and he's just making money. On that, is it bad? Who's better, the guy who can maintain himself, or the guy who's sponsored by his mom? Yeah. So actually, he explained me overnight that actually you can mix it. Yeah, there's nothing wrong in earning money, because I realized that we can discuss and we can talk much about art, but there's always this deep question. I mean, what is your money coming from? Yeah, how do you make a compromise? How do you sell your art, and what do you pay your bills with? Yeah. So what kind of money? Communism was a very bad, very stupid thing, very, very, very grayish, very depressive. But at the same time, there was a sort of emphasis on art making. The communists wanted to show off. Saying that there's some interesting and uncompromising art happening here. On the other hand, I also had this disillusionment with what happened, that we artists are unnecessary. I mean, obviously, I would never say that communism was a better place to be in, but I was kind of disillusioned that it's so hard to live in a capitalistic country. Obviously, I realized that it takes time to become a rich country, or a country where things are easier. Yeah, living is easier. In Germany or in Norway, you go there and you get some money from a scholarship, from the state, and here it's like nobody cares for you. You just have to fucking like either die or strive hard or fight your elbows, elbow your way through. Sometimes when I recollect the 90s, I believe that they might have resembled something of the 60s in America. That turmoil, that ferment, you know. So it was freedom, it was drugs, it was free love, you know. It was jazz, it was rock, it was like anything goes, yeah. And you sort of believe that it makes sense to live there and to create there and to be poor, but at the same time very, very inventive. So if somebody asks me whether I regret, you know, living here in the 90s, never in my life. You know, I mean, I'm sure it was a more interesting place than America or England at the time, because I happened to visit all these places, and their time was gone then. You know, I mean, these places culturally were formed much earlier, you know, and their highlights had happened earlier. Now I see that also kind of saw it going to Switzerland. I realized that people don't write good songs there, and they don't compose, don't write good literature there because they are too rich. I saw the curse of the rich society, where you are so fed up with goods that you can't write anymore. So actually I realized it's good to be in a so-so place, shitty place like Poland was.
I spoke them all before sunset.
Many of the questions Tymanski asks remain unanswered, and he himself is a living example of an artist with avant-garde roots grappling with the capitalist system. One day you see him releasing a very provocative and uncompromising album, only to turn on the TV and see him on the jury of a talent show he had openly criticized a few years earlier.
However, Tymanski's struggles, disillusionments, frustrations and flirtations with pop culture turned out to be extremely fruitful. With his many ups and downs, he remains a notable character on the Polish music scene, and some of his works will forever remain milestones of the scene's condition and evolution.
This episode of The Final Curtain was produced for Culture.pl and hosted by Adam Żuławski and me, Nitzan Reisner.
If you want to learn more about the story you just heard, see the show notes in your podcast app, or go to the Stories from the East and West website at sftew.com.
Remember to check our feed next week for more of The Final Curtain. You'll get to know 2 cabaret members who experienced the transition from strict censorship under the communist regime to complete freedom of speech in a reunited Germany.
See you next week.